Welcome to Xhibition, an Xbox podcast, episode number 15. My name is Samuel Adams, and this is a weekly show dedicated entirely to the world of Xbox. This week, we've got some pretty bad news for some players out there because Halo Infinite will not include campaign co-op or Forge mode at launch. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. That's our big headline story for the week. But on top of that, we've got plenty to dive into in terms of a brand new dashboard update rolling out now to Alpha Skip Ahead users that improves the resolution of the Xbox Series X dashboard. Additionally, Myst is coming to Xbox for the first time. For the cloud players out there, some new touch control games have been added to the library. And of course, we're talking a lot about Quake this week because QuakeCon is officially underway. And on top of that, some pretty big games have been added to Game Pass, especially for those PC players. But we've got plenty of news to dive into surrounding that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So let's go ahead and get the bad news out of the way first. Halo Infinite will not include campaign co-op or a Forge mode at launch. And for those that might not be aware, Forge mode is basically your multiplayer map editor where you can upload your creations and share them with the community. It's a fantastic way to do everything from create legacy maps or bring in maps from other games or even experiment with entirely new game modes. It's that kind of creative freedom that Forge mode tends to afford people, but neither of these experiences are going to be ready when the game does launch this holiday season. It's a very big bummer, and Joseph Staten, the head of creative on Halo Infinite, explains the reasoning behind it. Quote, "When we looked at these two experiences, campaign co-op and Forge, we made the determination that they're just not ready." Joseph Staten, head of creative on Halo Infinite, said in a video. "So we're going to keep campaign co-op and Forge in the oven for a little bit longer. When they're ready, we're going to release them as part of our seasonal roadmap next year," end quote. So in short, instead of these modes being added to the game at launch, they're going to be added in this kind of live service setup that so many games are adopting these days. Now, they say that campaign co-op is targeted for season 2, while Forge is set for season 3. These seasons are set up in 3-month intervals, so if the game launches, say, in November, you can probably expect campaign co-op to release sometime around February or March, and then you can probably expect to see Forge sometime around June or July of next year. April, May, June. Yes, my math is correct on that. So we'll see what the official dates for those updates will eventually be. And then on top of that, in terms of a release date, Staten says, quote, "We'll be talking about our actual release date very soon. Gamescom is coming up very shortly. That seems to be the right place to reveal that kind of information. That is my personal bet." But this is something that, while it doesn't impact me directly, as somebody who primarily just plays Halo campaigns solo and sticks to solo multiplayer matches occasionally, I'll party up with some friends in regular multiplayer, which is still going to be available at launch of Halo Infinite. A ton of players have these iconic experiences playing cooperative campaigns. This is a major part of Halo for so many people, and Forge is, while not as significant as campaign co-op, still a big part of a lot of players' Halo dreams, Halo aspirations. And this is what the risk of a live service, kind of games as a service world brings, because for a lot of people this is acceptable. For me, this is acceptable, but should it be? That's kind of the question that a lot of people are asking, because I see a lot of understanding in the community. I see a lot of frustration in the community. But I think one thing that really needs to be considered here, and this is what I said on Twitter, there are a ton of armchair developers out there that have never developed a game in their life. I've never developed a game in my life, but there are a ton of armchair developers out there that are looking on and saying what the team at 343 should be doing. They're saying, how can this happen? You've had 7 years of development, etc., etc. Don't talk unless you know what you're talking about. If you're not adding value to the conversation, then why add anything at all? That's kind of my perception here, because I think that the input from the community is incredibly valuable when you're asking for feedback, when you're talking about what you want a game to be. Obviously, Halo Infinite is taking things back to the old school roots of Halo. And I feel like that's in large part due to the feedback around Halo 5, due to the feedback around even Halo 4, and really getting back to the roots of what players want. Because ultimately, gaming is about creating enjoyable experiences that fans can get behind. And so that requires listening to fans and seeing what they want, seeing what they love the most about their storied franchises that they've been playing for so many years. But it gets to a point where you have to let the developers develop. And with COVID-19 continuing to be an impact, and the kind of unprecedented impact that the Delta variant is having on return to work plans, on office structures, on, in general, jobs. There's a lot of people that are moving around right now, and there's a lot of weight that comes with living through a pandemic. You have to be understanding beyond the traditional level of understanding, in my opinion. And so with Halo Infinite, I'm still exactly as excited as I was before, but I certainly understand the hardship that a lot of players are facing right now, because I'm sure, especially with Game Pass Ultimate, so many people had been planning on diving in on day one with their best friends to relive the glory days of Halo Infinite, or I should say of Halo through Infinite, with Game Pass Ultimate, because they have access to this game. One doesn't have to pay $60 and the other doesn't have to pay $60. You just get the game. That's super cool. And that experience will still come. You will still be able to get that same kind of excitement. And I think that there is going to be plenty of content here at launch. Of course, you're going to have the full campaign single player. And on top of that, a very robust multiplayer offering here with more flighting to come, testing big team battle and other iconic modes. Of course, new modes are on the way as well. So I think Halo Infinite is still going to be one of the biggest games of 2021, but for a lot of players, this campaign co-op could be at least a temporary pause on buying the game if they're not a member of Game Pass. And I think that's going to be a pretty big impact for a lot of people. My question to you is, will this impact you? So hit me up on Twitter, let me know, leave it in the comment section down below. If you head over to anchor.fm/Xhibition. Yeah, that's the new feed. If you head over to anchor.fm/Xhibition, you should be able to send me a voice message. Let me know what you think. And of course, I'll have all of this stuff linked down below, because I love hearing what people have to say about this kind of news. It doesn't impact me. It could impact you. Just let me know. Should be interesting. Now let's talk about this new update coming to the Xbox Series X dashboard. A resolution boost is on the way, bringing the layout up to 4K. First and foremost, I didn't even know that this was an issue, because the dashboard itself, in my opinion, looks incredibly clean and crisp, but it seems that's going to be getting even crispier. They say at Games Radar, quote, Xbox Series X is getting a higher resolution dashboard for 4K displays, and certain Xbox insiders can start testing it out today. While the Xbox Series X can play 4K games with video content just fine, its dashboard has remained comparatively low resolution, which may lead to a fuzzier look on the best gaming TVs that otherwise make your games look great. So this is cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing this added to the entire experience, but the biggest issue that I see a lot of people discussing in terms of the dashboard and in terms of the Xbox UI is the HDR flicker. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about here, whenever you boot up a game that has HDR, which I believe is the overwhelming majority of Xbox Series X experiences, if not all of them, because of auto HDR, but if you boot up a game, for the majority of televisions, there is this transition into HDR mode. And so instead of just jumping in and seeing a very smooth transition into the game, there's this cut to black, and then the game itself comes back up with the HDR icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. That's something that's neat to be able to do, but it's like, I like HDR, I just don't like the transition into HDR. So I would love, more than anything, to see the dashboard not only get a 4K update, but also make the dashboard itself HDR. My question here is, I don't know what that looks like on the back end. Of course, if you can emulate Xbox 360 and original Xbox games I would assume you can probably do something similar for the dashboard, where you can smartly select, for lack of a better term, if the monitor itself has HDR or if it doesn't. Again, I don't know what has to be done on the back end in terms of the basic user interface and in terms of how the framework of the Xbox Series X itself is actually built. But that's the big difference for me, and I'm looking forward to hopefully that update coming. That hasn't been discussed, but I'm sure that it's on the team's radar because that flicker is just not great. So stay tuned. Again, if you are in the alpha skip ahead, you can go ahead, dive in, check out that 4K dashboard. As I said at the beginning, I didn't really even know this was a problem. I didn't notice that it wasn't 4K to begin with, but again, my eyesight is that of an old man, so take my word for what you will. Now I've got some good news for puzzle fans. Myst is coming to Xbox for the first time on August the 26th with Xbox Game Pass. That's a pretty significant win for the Xbox family. I love Myst and I love the kind of experience that it brings. It's very much so one of those puzzle island adventures, and that's what you get from the description here in the Xbox Wire. Quote, journey to Myst Island and other stunning locations called Ages and begin to unravel the mystery you have been thrust into. As you learn what happened on the island, you will discover that you are playing a key role in an epic story whose ending has not yet been written. Explore deeper connections in these magnificent, surreal ages, uncover a story of ruthless family betrayal, and make choices that will affect both you and the world of Myst itself. So this is not just a simple port to an Xbox console or a port to a Windows 10 PC. This goes above and beyond. The developers, write, quote, one of the technical features we've used to achieve this is AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution. This allows us to crank the graphics quality much higher than we typically would be able to. Thanks to FSR, Myst can run at 4K at smooth 60 FPS on Xbox Series X with the highest graphics settings across the board and at 1440p at 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series S. With FSR, we effectively decrease the screen percentage of the game down in the background, then allow the super sampling process to sharpen the image. There are some minor differences to how the game looks at native 4K resolution without screen percentage adjustments, but overall, FSR provides a nearly 75% increase in performance on Series X and S on a 4K display without sacrificing much visual fidelity at all. So of course, there you have the side-by-side comparison. It really does make the game look crispy, and I can't tell much of a difference between the left and the right in terms of downgrades, except for the sharper textures and better shadows. So that's something that is very, very cool. They do say the visual changes are subtle, and that's how they are supposed to be, which is fantastic, because subtle changes with a huge leap in performance is exactly what the devs are trying to achieve. So if you do want to dive in and check out Myst, again, this is a very iconic game that's going to be launching on Xbox on August the 26th. Again, very cool game coming to Game Pass, and one that I will dive into just to see how good it can look with that HDR and with this Fidelity FX Super Resolution. I love that this generation, players have the option to acknowledge how these developers are working to improve performance and they are working to deliver better experiences. You can pay attention to that if you would want. You can also be ignorant to it and just play the games and be totally fine. That's also an option as well. But developers are making so many technological breakthroughs right now. And of course, the providers of these tools are also making breakthroughs to where you see so much more being done with less. Not to get too far off track, but I was watching a video this morning from Digital Foundry, digging into Crysis 3 running on the Nintendo Switch. This game looks gorgeous on the Switch, and of course it is at a lower resolution, but you effectively can get a PlayStation 4 style experience on the Nintendo Switch today. And when you scale that up and you see the impact that that same kind of technology can have on the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 even, and PCs, it's insane to see what's being achieved these days. So this is very, very cool. And again, if you do want to check out Myst, this is a game that is taking advantage of that new technology, coming to Xbox Game Pass on August the 26th. Now, before we dive into the newest touch control games and talking about a new accessory that's coming soon, next week on Xbox has a pretty big lineup on the way. Now, normally I don't dive into these articles because they're kind of just high-level overviews, but there's so much happening right now in the world of Xbox that I'm personally having a bit of trouble keeping up. Of course, we have Quake, which we'll talk about more towards the end of the show, and we have 12 Minutes, which has also been added to Game Pass recently, one that's getting a bit of a mixed return, some mixed reviews there. But on top of that, you have The Ascent, Hades. There are so many big games coming to Game Pass, tons of EA Play games coming as well, and they're not stopping there because this week is Psychonauts 2 week. On top of that, you also have Aliens Fireteam Elite, a game that is not included in Game Pass, but one that has caught my eye for a while. This is effectively your Call of Duty Zombies experience, but in the world of aliens. I love that franchise, and this is one that I'll be checking out on Twitch. I'm not totally sold on it yet. As I said a couple of episodes ago, this is one feels like it could go a lot of different ways. And with Back 4 Blood on the way, bringing that Left 4 Dead squad-based kind of zombie experience, it kind of makes sense for this one to kind of sit on the back burner until maybe a price drop comes around. That's just my 2 cents, though. But on top of that, you have King's Bounty 2, Rims Racing, Darker Skies, which looks very interesting, kind of interested to see more about that one, and a few others, but Psychonauts 2 is coming on August the 25th. This is coming to console and PC, optimized for Series X and S, and of course, on top of that right now, you can pick up the original Psychonauts either on Game Pass or on sale right now for 99 cents. That's a pretty great deal for a classic old school Xbox game, but of course, as I mentioned, included with Game Pass if you want to catch up on the story so far. Not necessary in my opinion, but you certainly can if you would like. Now, I want to talk about this game coming on August the 26th. This is Islanders, and it's $5. I played Islanders when it was in early access on PC a couple of years ago, and if you are intimidated by Civilization is effectively what I would compare this game to. People that are fans of Civ are going to hate me. But if you're a fan of these civilization building games, if you're a fan of these community management games, but you don't have the time to learn intricate systems and you don't have the time to really become invested in how these economies work, then Islanders could be a really great option because effectively you go from island to island and you put stuff like wood mills next to trees, if that's the right term. You connect fishing huts to bodies of water. You have large open spaces for your various plots of land and your grass and your farmland. And so to be able to build communities like that does take thinking, but each island takes maybe 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how intricate you would like to go, and then you move on to the next island. And it's this never-ending community builder. Very fun game. Highly recommend building some villages. And again, for $5, I believe that's what it is on the Nintendo Switch, so I would assume it's the same on Xbox Series X and S. It's a very relaxing experience that I would highly recommend. In addition to that, I also want to say there's a game that I've been playing recently called Humankind that came out on Game Pass last week. So if you haven't seen this one, I would recommend checking it out if you are into the civilization builders, as I said. But I do want to say that in comparison to Islanders, this is your Civilization on steroids. And it's not one that really tickled my fancy, personally, because of the intricacy of it. There are so many economies to learn, there are so many systems to learn, and I'm sure that, again, fans of these hardcore style games will probably make fun of me in the comments, but Humankind is a really cool looking game with a lot of intricacy to it that is out now on Windows 10 PCs with Game Pass if you want to check it out. It's available on Steam, but effectively the idea is that you build a civilization from the ground up. You start from the very beginning and you kind of shape world history as you see fit. So that's something that I think a lot of players could be interested in, especially if they are invested in the, historical nature of the world. If you're a fan of AP US history, if you're a fan of world history especially, this is something that certainly is going to be a good win for you. I was hoping this would be gameplay, but it seems like it's just a couple of astronauts fighting, which is certainly good enough for a like from me. But with that being said, Islanders is on the way, and you can check out Humankind. Of course, we just talked about Myst, so if you would like to check that one out, you can as well. But so many games coming out right now. It seems like it's been a very big season for especially the indies. I'm interested in seeing more about Space Station Sprint coming on August 27th. It says infiltrate each space station and complete your objective before your escape ship is spotted by the enemy. Sprint your way to find the quickest path to the objective and space jump back to your escape ship. Seems like kind of a speed run style game, so probably one that I'll be checking out a bit. But so many cool little games to check out right now, and big games on the way. It's a very exciting time to be playing Xbox or games in general. Lots of big stories to say in the future, and lots of big games to play right now. Now, we'll touch on this one briefly because it's pretty self-explanatory, but Xbox Touch controls have been added to 10 more games in the Xbox Game Pass Cloud library. This report comes from Pure Xbox's Daniel Hollis, but the graphic says it all. You have Hades getting touch controls, which is the big one for the week, in addition to Wasteland Remastered, Wasteland 2, and Wasteland 3, Going Under, Peggle 2, Need for Speed Heat, Farming Simulator 19, Psychonauts, and Bloodroots all have touch controls. And this is something that is super important for the future of Xbox Cloud gaming, and I'll tell you why. Not everybody can afford a backbone. Not everybody has an Xbox controller, especially if you're thinking about people that are outside of the Xbox ecosystem. And so it's important to be able to just whip out a mobile device, a tablet, a phone, whatever it might be, and start playing without any additional input. Just be able to have a device, get going right there, no additional overhead. This is really going to be important whenever the inevitable third tier of Xbox Game Pass emerges. Of course, right now, I suppose it would technically be the fourth tier, but you have the basics with Xbox Game Pass for console and Game Pass for PC, but then you have Game Pass Ultimate that includes cloud, console, and PC. Whenever they announce the fourth one, which they have said is on the way, which is probably going to be a cheaper, pared-back, cloud-specific version of Xbox Game Pass, that's going to be your budget audience. That's going to be somebody that is not invested in the Xbox ecosystem, but that just wants to explore games on the go. That's where you have to have a wide library of touch control supported games that are ready to go right out of the gate. And so Hades is obviously going to be a big win, and I think that investing in creating touch controls for Hades means that it's probably going to be on Game Pass for quite some time. That's just me kind of reading into the situation, but this is something that has to be developed very carefully. And if you don't know how these touch controls work, it's not necessarily flipping a switch and just emulating an overlay of an Xbox controller onto the screen. These touch controls are designed very deliberately for each game. These touch controls are built with the experience that the player has in mind. And so whenever you consider that, you begin to see the investment that it takes to bring that kind of compatibility to Hades and Wasteland and so many other games. So all of that to say, these 10 games now have touch control support, so dive in, give them a shot. I kind of want to go back and play through Psychonauts 2 whenever I have some downtime at work, or if I'm just hanging out on the couch, because I would love to catch up on that before I dive into Psychonauts 2. The big thing here is to lower that latency, and it's gotten down to a point that latency is less of a focus in the world of cloud gaming, but it's still something that players do have to consider, and for a game like Hades, where timing is everything, I think that's going to be something that really shows how far Microsoft has come if it works properly. So again, you can dive in, check it out right now if you do have Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. And again, I'm sure that mobile experience is probably going to be on the way in the world of Game Pass. I would expect news on that probably around the end of the year, the first of the year, something like that. Now let's go ahead and talk about the newest Xbox accessory, the new Xbox Stereo headset. If this looks familiar to you, it's because this is effectively the Xbox wireless headset that was released towards, I believe, the beginning of this year. It seems like March, somewhere around there. But this is effectively the exact same design, the exact same functionality, but it's not wireless. This plugs directly into the controller as you would any other standard wired headset, but it does add the functionality of the right knob being volume and the left knob being a balance between your game and your chat audio. I have had this Xbox wireless headset for 5 months, I believe now. March, April, May, June, July, August. Yes, so 5 months with the Xbox wireless headset. It was not provided, it was not sent. I purchased this. Uh, It is the best wireless headset that I've ever used in gaming. Now, traditionally, I've just had a pair of earbuds that I've plugged into the bottom of a remote on both PlayStation 4, Xbox One X, and now Xbox Series X. But I wanted the higher fidelity Xbox experience. So I went ahead, picked up the wireless headset, and it definitely has a different feel to it. You can tell that it certainly was thought out. It's something that is well designed. I like the way the controls work on it, and it brings a very good, robust sound. It's very comfortable to wear for long sessions. And of course, within the Xbox settings itself, you can have some bass boost in there. There's an entire equalization option that you can really customize the way your headset sounds. And so all of those features are going to be a big benefit for those that are trying to dive in and play a lot of these new experiences that are very sound focused. I'm thinking about Hellblade 2, looking back to Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice to see that impact the audio had. That's when the hardware really matters. And so they say, quote, "The result of this is hearing the audio as close as possible to how it was recorded by ensuring clean mid and high frequency performance with strong bass. And to take your audio one step further, the Xbox stereo headset supports high fidelity spatial sound technologies, including Windows Sonic, Dolby Atmos, and DTS Headphone X. And of course, this may require additional subscriptions, etc., to these sound services, but it's certainly great to have these options." Overall, the price itself is pretty good. For the wired headset, you can get it for $59.99. I feel like that's pretty affordable in comparison to a lot of the other headsets that are out there on the market, or at least it's right in line with where it needs to be. The most important factor here is that this is leagues better than the old stereo headset that came out on the Xbox One. That's something that was often bundled with Halo the Master Chief Collection on the last generation, and it just had no build quality, and the sound itself was very much so lacking. So with the Xbox stereo headset and with the Xbox wireless headset, this is certainly going to be a big win for a lot of players, especially those that don't mind not having the wireless setup, because technically it's still a wireless setup. You know, whenever I think about headsets, I think back to the old days of plugging in, multiple cables and running not only your controller cable, but also your headset cable all the way back to wherever you were sitting in front of your television. Now you just plug the stereo wired headset into your controller. It's still wireless, not connected to your console, so it's really not that big of a deal, but again, very good affordable option if you don't want to go the extra mile and get the wireless headset, but it still bakes in a ton of those awesome features. Now let's talk about Quake, specifically QuakeCon, because that's what's going on right now, and we aren't going to get into the intricacies of QuakeCon because if you're a Quake fan, you're probably watching QuakeCon. Or in general, if you're a Bethesda fan, this is a really important opportunity to tune in and see some pretty big announcements. This is nothing in comparison to a showcase, but it certainly does bring some excitement within the gaming community. When it comes to Quake, this is one of those iconic retro shooters that kind of defines a generation. I've been talking a lot recently about a game called Proteus that really captures that iconic retro old school first-person shooter feel. The game that Proteus is capturing is Quake. That's what's happening. And so to see this iconic game come back, not only on Xbox across multiple devices, including the Switch for $10, which I think is pretty cool. But to see Quake come back with the enhanced re-release is really important for a lot of players, and I think it's really important for the future of Quake because that old school experience is still solidified and it's still available. In the same way that the old school Doom games are across every device, Quake is coming in that exact same way. And when it comes to arena shooters, of course, Quake 3 is generation defining. We wouldn't have Quake Champions today without Quake 3. And so many of those arena-based shooter games, they just played such a pivotal role. But on top of that, all three of them, Quake, the enhanced re-release, Quake 2, and Quake 3 are all available via Game Pass on PC, with the original Quake, with the re-release on Xbox One and Xbox Series X and S through backward compatibility, available on console as well. Now, next generation optimizations are coming at a later date, bringing a native 4K resolution and 120Hz refresh rates, according to the official announcement on the Xbox Wire. But updated for modern gaming systems, the article says, this version of Quake features up to 4K resolution and widescreen support on compatible devices, enhanced models, dynamic lighting, anti-aliasing, depth of field, and more, bringing the shooter and both its expansions to a new generation of players. There are plenty of free levels to play with add-ons, providing post-launch support featuring some of the best community-made content made for the game. And there's not just a ton of single-player content to explore, the genre-defining multiplayer is also intact, with the re-release supporting local or online co-op for up to 4 players across its campaign, original expansions, and even 2 campaign add-ons created by the award-winning team at Machine Games, developers of Wolfenstein: The New Order and Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. That's a lot of content. And so if you're looking for something to fill the gap for a while, then if you want to grab a couple of friends, dive in, Quake is certainly there to fill the need. And of course, Quake 2 and Quake 3 are also on Xbox Game Pass for PC in their original form, so that is something that I think a lot of players are going to enjoy. Of course, Quake Arena is also back in Quake 3. That's fantastic, with dedicated servers for online matchmaking, cross-platform support, the full kit and caboodle. So if you do want to dive in, see the old school experience, Quake is one of the best ways you can possibly do that. And again, I can't gush enough about these old school retro experiences because of the importance that they have in today's society and in today's gaming space. Because without Quake and without Doom and without these iconic relics, you wouldn't have gaming as it is today. And of course, when you think about stuff like Devil Daggers, is one game that comes to mind. That is clearly inspired, at least in part, by Quake because of the feel of the game. And they just don't make them like this anymore. And I think that's something that really brings value to this. And for the old school retro fans, this is obviously one that adds tons of accessibility. You don't have to hunt down any kind of physical versions. You don't have to download ROMs. You don't have to buy it on GOG if you don't want to. Game Pass has it readily available. And for console players, that's incredibly valuable as well, even more so, just because it's even harder for them to get a hold of stuff without the ability to download ROMs online and to download various new editions that have cropped up over the years. So again, out now on Xbox Game Pass for PC. I've got these downloaded right now, and the original Quake is also out on Xbox consoles. So if you're feeling retro, if you're feeling nostalgic, dive in, give them a shot. That wraps up this week's episode of Xhibition. If you enjoy the show and you're new here, hit that subscribe button on YouTube or on your podcast feed of choice and get the show delivered to you every single Sunday. On top of that, tune in next week. We'll have plenty of news to dive into with Gamescom on the way and a very exciting release season ahead. Very unfortunate about the Halo Infinite news we discussed today, but let me know in the comments section or on Anchor or on Twitter, wherever you want to hit me up, what you think about that delay. But I'll talk to you soon, and until next time, keep on playing.